Apparently, having a buddy over for a few beers in your own backyard is now enough to warrant a 911 call. Who would have guessed, right? Thanks to my delightful neighbor from the anadrama nest, what should have been a chill afternoon turned into a full-blown neighborhood meltdown. She decided that two guys enjoying football on a Saturday somehow looked like a major security threat. What began as her over-the-top complaint spiraled into one of the most insane community feuds I've ever seen. This woman got so wrapped up in trying to wreck my peaceful retirement that she crossed lines I didn't even know were there. But unfortunately for her, she picked the wrong guy to come after. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. See, retirement was supposed to be easy. After 8 intense years leading a SWAT team through some of the toughest missions imaginable, I thought I'd earned a little calm. I bought a quiet home in Pinewood Heights, your typical suburb where the biggest problem is someone leaving their trash cans out too long. I was doing some light security consulting from home, just enough to stay sharp but without stress. Life was smooth, peaceful even, or so I thought. That peace shattered on a day that should have been perfect. My old friend Sam Rivera was coming by. We'd gone way back to our police academy days. Now he's a big-shot real estate lawyer, and we hadn't hung out in months. I was genuinely excited for the ketchup-ass football, a couple of cold beers, and zero responsibilities. I set up the outdoor TV on the patio, packed a cooler, and waited for Sam to roll in. The weather? Perfect. My team was playing. I had absolutely nothing else on my plate. He showed up around 1 o'clock, and right away, we clicked back into our old groove. You know how it is with lifelong friends, you don't skip a beat. Even after months apart, there we were, two guys in the backyard, enjoying the game with drinks in hand. At one point, when our team scored in the third quarter, we got a little loud, I won't lie. Probably cheered for 30 seconds. Just basic football excitement. But that tiny moment, that's what triggered my neighbor. I'd noticed her before, always lurking by the window since I moved in about 8 months ago. Her name's Miranda Blackwood. Learned that from her mailbox. We never actually spoke. She was always watching, always noting who came by. I figured she was just your typical nosy Anna, retired, bored, keeping tabs on the block for entertainment. Didn't think much of it, a broken bar, until that Saturday. I caught her taking pictures of us through her kitchen window. Not even hiding it, just full-on snapping shots with her phone. Sam noticed, too, and joked about feeling famous, but I felt uneasy. Who photographs their neighbors watching a football game? That's when I should have trusted my instincts, say something felt off. But I let it slide. Big mistake. About 20 minutes later, a city inspector showed up at my gate. Middle-aged guy. Looked almost embarrassed to be there. Sorry to bother you folks, he said. Got a complaint about loud noise. Said there was a big gathering going on. Sam and I exchanged a look. A big gathering? It was just the two of us. Noise? We yelled for 30 seconds. The inspector looked around, saw two guys, some beers, and a TV. He got the picture instantly. I have to respond to every report, he explained, but this clearly isn't what was described. Just keep it down after 9 p.m., and you're fine. He was actually cool about it, even mentioned something about our team's chances that day. But as he left, I saw Miranda in her window again, and she looked furious. She wanted us to get hit with a fine or some kind of punishment, and it burned her that we didn't. At that point, I knew she wasn't done. This was just her opening move. The moment the inspector's car disappeared, she stormed out of her house. Not walked, stormed, like she was going into battle. This is a quiet residential area, she declared as she neared my fence. Your loud parties are lowering property values. As the Anadrama Nest president, I'm keeping an eye on this situation. Now, I've dealt with all types of people in my SWAT years. Panicked, angry, unpredictable, but something about her tone instantly raised red flags. This wasn't just a cranky neighbor. This woman thought she had real power. Ma'am, we were just watching the game, I said calmly. And what ho? I don't recall signing up for anything like that when I bought this house. Sam perked up immediately when she mentioned the Anadrama Nest. The guy knows property law like the back of his hand, and he was clearly skeptical. All residents followed the community guidelines, whether they signed or not, she snapped. Expect a violation notice soon. Then she spun around and marched back to her place. Sam and I stood there, Stunned. "Dude," he finally said, "there is something seriously off with this woman. Real Andromanest groups have documents, elections, structure." He was already pulling out his phone. "And that stuff she said about authority, even without consent, none of that's legal." 5 minutes later, Sam confirmed what we were both suspecting. There was no official HOA listed for our neighborhood. Nothing. Which meant Miranda was either completely making this up at Broken Bar or running some kind of scam. Either way, my peaceful Saturday had just taken a very weird turn. But the real shock came 2 hours later when Miranda actually delivered on her threat. I'm not exaggerating. This woman had printed what looked like an official violation notice and slapped it on my front door like she was serving legal papers. Pinewood Heights Andromanest violation notice, it read, with my name typed in bold at the top. Noise violation, $300. Unauthorized gathering, $200. Failure to register guests, $150. Total due, $650. Payable within 48 hours or further enforcement action would be taken. $650 for watching football with a friend? Sam took one glance and his lawyer instincts kicked in immediately. "Mason," he said, holding up the notice, "this is sophisticated forgery. The language is technically correct, but the legal authority is completely fabricated. Someone who knows real estate law wrote this." He started snapping photos of everything. "I already checked county records while you were grilling. There is no legally registered Andromanest or HOA in this neighborhood. These documents, they're not just bogus, they're criminal." And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a nosy neighbor on a power trip. Miranda Blackwood wasn't confused. She had real knowledge, real tools, and apparently, a real plan to take over my life one fake violation at a time. As the evening rolled on and Sam packed up to leave, he gave me a firm handshake and one warning: document everything, don't pay a dime, don't engage unless absolutely necessary, and call me the moment anything escalates. I agreed, and as his taillights disappeared down the street, I stood alone, holding that fake violation like it was radioactive. That's when my phone buzzed with a text, a unknown number. "Mr. Torres, Andromanest compliance is mandatory. Continued violation will result in community enforcement action. You have 48 hours." Community enforcement action. What the hell was that supposed to mean? Just to be safe, I texted my old SWAT commander, Captain Morgan. "Heads up, might need backup soon. Weird situation with a hostile neighbor developing fast." His reply was almost instant. "Copy that. Team's always ready." It was reassuring to know I still had people in my corner, but honestly, I hoped it wouldn't come to that. I didn't retire to get into a suburban Cold War. I just wanted peace. But then, as I watched Miranda's house through my bedroom window that night, I noticed something strange. Multiple people arriving after dark. Not friends, not family, people I hadn't seen before. And suddenly, I knew something big was happening. And one of those people? They had been watching me for weeks, and they knew exactly who I was. I drove past the community center and saw Miranda setting up for her meeting. And I mean really setting up. There were professional banners that read Pinewood Heights Andromanest, multiple tables with official-looking binders, even a podium with a microphone. This wasn't some casual neighborhood gathering. Miranda had poured serious time and money into constructing the illusion of legitimate authority. She wasn't just claiming power, she was manufacturing it, building a full-blown fake organization with props, branding, and presence. Then I noticed them. 4 men, dressed in matching navy blue uniforms with shoulder patches that read Community Security Services. Clean-cut, professional, the kind of guys you'd expect guarding a private bank or luxury estate. But it wasn't their outfits that raised red flags. It was their formation. Their eyes scanned the area. Their body language was tight. They moved like a trained team, coordinating positions, checking side lanes, and noting exits. These guys weren't volunteers. They were running an operation. I called Sam immediately. "You need to see this for yourself," I said. Miranda's turned her fake Andromanest into something that looks legit, security personnel included. Sam was at his office but promised to swing by the community center on his way home. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. "Mason," he said, his voice tight, "I saw it. This is way beyond some neighborhood drama. This woman's invested thousands into building a counterfeit authority. Uniforms, banners, binders, podiums. It's organized fraud. That evening, I made the decision to attend the meeting, not to engage, just to watch. I wanted to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I arrived early and took a seat in the back where I had a full view without standing out. By 7 p.m., the room was packed. I counted 47 people, families, retirees, longtime residents, even a few newcomers like me. Miranda had stirred something real, concern, and now she was feeding it with pure performance. She began her presentation with a slideshow of comparable neighborhoods where property values dropped after security threats. There were graphs, charts, even fabricated case studies. If you didn't know it was fake, you'd swear it was a municipal briefing delivered by a paid consultant. Then came the real twist. Recent arrival Mr. Torres has been conducting suspicious activities, she announced, throwing surveillance photos of my house onto the screen. I felt the air change. People turned. Property value protection requires community cooperation, she added, cold and composed. Then she brought up her security team, the same 4 men I'd seen earlier. She introduced them as Community Security Services, contracted to keep the neighborhood safe. Dylan, the apparent team leader, gave a clean, corporate-style presentation. Violation enforcement, routine patrols, incident reporting, all covered under our $150 monthly security plan, he said. Participants receive priority response and guaranteed property value protection. It was slick, professional, and 100% fake. And the crowd, they loved it. Young families nodded in agreement. Elderly residents leaned in. New homeowners clutched their flyers with wide eyes. Miranda knew exactly what pressure points to heed: safety, money, fear. Then she crossed the line. Our security assessment had identified special concerns regarding elderly residents, Miranda said. My blood ran cold. Mrs. Esperanza Morales, who lives adjacent to Mr. Torres, may be particularly vulnerable due to her age and proximity to suspicious activity. That was it. The moment I knew this wasn't just about intimidation, it was about targeting. Esperanza was 76, kind, quiet, the sort of woman who left baked goods on your porch just for being friendly. Now she was being painted as collateral damage in Miranda's campaign. After the meeting, I watched as several neighbors approached Dylan's team to sign up for security coverage. Mrs. Peterson and her husband were among them. So were 6 other families. Real money was changing hands, fueled by Miranda's propaganda. Sam found me in the parking lot. I documented everything, he said. This isn't just a scam, it's a criminal enterprise. Fraud, impersonation, targeted harassment, elder exploitation, a broken bar. This is serious. But the worst was still coming. The next morning, I walked out and saw Esperanza sitting on her front porch. She looked scared. Mayo, she called softly. Some men came to my house late last night, a broken bar. She described them clearly at Dylan and his team, wearing their fake uniforms. They showed up after 9 p.m., claiming to be from the Anadrama Nest, said they needed to conduct a mandatory safety check. She refused to let them in. They'd become more aggressive, telling Esperanza that non-cooperation would affect her safety status in the community. That was it. I realized Miranda had crossed every line I'd drawn. Messing with me? Fine. I could handle fake citations, community gossip, even coordinated harassment. But going after a 76-year-old woman who treated me like her own grandson? Unforgivable. I called Captain Morgan immediately. Captain, I need the team. This is about to escalate beyond a civilian situation. His response came without hesitation. Copy that, Mason. What's your timeline? I looked at Esperanza's frightened face. Soon, Captain. Very soon. That afternoon, Dylan and his team rolled up to my property in a marked truck with professional-grade tools, claiming they had authority to remove non-compliant items. Neighbors gathered as they measured property lines, took photos, and even tried to take down my American flag, calling it an unapproved fixture. It was a show, a public performance to prove their false authority. But what they didn't know, this retired SWAT commander was done playing defense. When Dylan approached Esperanza again and told her, continued association with non-compliant residents affects your safety status, a broken bar, I stepped in. That was enough. Nobody threatens Esperanza. Nobody. But what came next? Even I wasn't ready for it. Miranda's next move? It involved people who looked exactly like the real thing. If you've ever watched a drama nest unfold in your own neighborhood, drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from, because what's coming is about to get very real, very fast. Monday morning brought an escalation that caught even me off guard. Despite all my tactical training, despite my experience in recognizing criminal behavior, I wasn't ready for what I saw from my back patio. It started subtly. 4 unfamiliar vehicles parked at strategic points along the street, 2 standard police cruisers, 1 unmarked black sedan, 1 vehicle that looked like a supervisor's SUV. At first, I felt relief. Finally, I thought, maybe someone else reported Miranda's fake operation, maybe real law enforcement was here to shut this down. But then I noticed the positioning. It wasn't right. Real police don't scatter randomly across a suburban street. They establish a command point. They coordinate. They contain. These cars, they were set up like a patrol grid, not a response team. And the timing, too perfect. Miranda had just announced an emergency drama nest meeting for that night, and now we had law enforcement in the morning. My instincts screamed this was part of her plan, not a fix. Then came confirmation. Around 10 a.m., one of the so-called officers approached my front door. He wore a perfect uniform, a badge, equipment belt, polished boots. Even his tone sounded official. "Mr. Torres," he said smoothly, "we've had complaints about your interference with community operations. You need to come with us for some questioning." To anyone else, he'd pass for a cop, but not to me. I've worked with real law enforcement for years. I know how real officers move, speak, operate. This guy was too polished. His badge number had too many digits. His radio wasn't connected to dispatch, it was replaying a looped recording. When I asked for a warrant, he got defensive, not confident. "Can you provide a warrant or any documentation? And your supervisor's contact details?" Real officers expect those questions. They're trained to answer them without flinching. This guy, he started to stammer, spoke faster, got twitchy. Classic signs of someone trying to maintain a lie under pressure. But what terrified me most was this. To a normal neighbor watching from behind their curtains, he looked 100% legitimate. I played dumb. "Officers, I'm happy to cooperate. A broken bar. I just want to understand what I'm being charged with." Then came the absurd accusation. "You've been interfering with official community governance," he claimed, "and harassing drama nest personnel." The language was off, way off. No real cop says community governance like it's a criminal offense. HOA disputes are civil issues, not arrestable crimes. Meanwhile, Sam was down the street in his parked car, recording everything. As a lawyer, he knew instantly, this was legally impossible. There's no law that says you can be arrested for questioning an unregistered group or refusing to pay fake dues. You can't be criminally charged for challenging a phony organization. But from the outside, it looked like justice. Like the community finally getting rid of the guy causing trouble. Fake uniforms, fake cops, real damage. And that was just the beginning. The police operation was clearly timed to coincide with Miranda's mandatory drama nest community meeting that evening. By afternoon, word had spread fast. Mason Torres was under police investigation for harassment and interference with community safety. Exactly the psychological warfare Miranda intended. Residents who may have questioned her authority were now seeing what looked like law enforcement validation of her claims. It was diabolical, strategic, and completely fake. But Miranda made one fatal miscalculation. She scheduled her big meeting at the same community center where she'd been building her fake drama nest operation all week, bringing together everyone she had deceived. Neighbors paying bogus fees, elderly residents she'd intimidated, families terrified their property values were collapsing. All in one room. All it would take was one person to ask the right questions, and tonight, that person was going to be Esperanza. By 7 p.m., the community center was packed and nearly 60 residents filled the room. Miranda had fake officers stationed around like real security, her banners professionally printed, and her polished presentation queued up. The atmosphere was thick with tension. You could feel the fear and confusion she had sown for weeks. People genuinely believed their neighborhood was in danger, their homes at risk, their lives impacted. That's how confidence scams work. They prey on real concerns with fake solutions. Miranda's presentation, her masterpiece of manipulation. She showed photos of my house, supposed violation records, testimonials from scared or confused neighbors, and most damaging of all, the appearance of police support. Mr. Torres has repeatedly interfered within a drama-nesque governance, threatened community security personnel, and endangered elderly residents, she declared, in a chillingly calm voice. Tonight, we decide whether this community is protected by legitimate authority or controlled by dangerous individuals who reject accountability. Then it happened. The fake arrest attempt. The lead officer stood up and shouted, "We're with Pinewood Heights Enforcement. Mason Torres and Sam Rivera, you're being detained for obstructing neighborhood governance." The room froze. Neighbors stared at me. Some looked relieved of finally, the troublemaker was being dealt with. Others looked confused. How did watching football turn into criminal charges? But Sam, always calm under pressure, immediately shifted into lawyer mode. "Officers, what are the specific charges? Where's the warrant? Which court authorized this arrest?" His voice was loud, clear and deliberately legal. He wasn't just defending me, he was exposing them. But the fake cops couldn't answer. The badge numbers? All wrong. The radios? Pre-recorded noise loops. The paperwork? Non-existent. Still, most people in that room weren't trained to spot fakes. They were just scared. And Dana Esperanza stood up, 76 years old, 5 feet tall, maybe 90 pounds soaking wet. But her presence stopped the entire room. "These are not real police," she said, strong and unwavering. "Real officers don't arrest people for asking questions about paperwork." A long silence followed. You could hear a pin drop. Every eye in the room turned to hear this tiny woman, challenging what looked like authority. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 45 years, she continued, voice rising. "I've worked with real police. I've served on real community boards. I know what legitimate authority looks like, and this isn't it." Miranda Blackwood is not an HOA president. "These men are not officers. This entire operation is a scam meant to take your money and turn you against your neighbors." The murmurs started. People were looking around, noticing what I'd noticed hours ago. Then Greg, the retired army guy, stood up. "I served 20 years. These aren't cops. Their gear's off. Their stance is off, and they're moving like civilians and not trained law enforcement." Then Peterson, the quiet neighbor who'd been scared enough to pay Miranda's fake fees, stood and demanded, "If this is a legitimate and a drama-nesque authority, then show us your state registration documents." And that's when the collapse began. One by one, residents started questioning the officers, asking for ID, radioing dispatch, calling out inconsistencies. The room turned into a storm of confusion and confrontation. Fake cops began stuttering, backing away, looking for exits. Because real cops, they're trained for these crowd control, pressure, chaos. These guys, they cracked in seconds. Everything Miranda built, her illusion, her power, her control, shattered in minutes. Because one brave woman had the courage to tell the truth to a room full of lies. But what happened next? That would determine whether this 76-year-old hero just saved her community or put herself directly in the crosshairs. The moment Esperanza called out those fake officers, everything changed. You could feel it as the atmosphere inside the community center shifted instantly. It was like watching a house of cards collapse, one trembling layer at a time. Miranda's confidence cracked in seconds. Her posture shifted from commanding to rattled, her voice from firm to frantic. The fake cops started glancing at each other, faces pale, silently screaming, "What do we do now?" And the neighbors, finally awake, began to really look at the people they'd been blindly trusting. But Miranda didn't back down. You've got to give her credit for commitment, even as her operation fell apart in real time. She doubled down on the deception. "Mrs. Morales is clearly confused and being manipulated by Mr. Torres," she insisted, struggling to reclaim control. "These officers are responding to legitimate complaints from multiple residents about ongoing criminal activity." She was still playing the authority card, trying to paint any challenge to her as dangerous or unpatriotic. But Esperanza had opened the floodgates, and there was no holding back the tide. Then Greg stood up, back straight, voice solid, that military edge impossible to ignore. "Ma'am, "I've worked with law enforcement in 3 states during my Army service," he said. "These men are not police officers." He calmly began listing the details: wrong gear, incorrect stance, improper radio usage, badge designs that didn't match any known department. "Real officers don't make arrests over civil anadromous disputes," Greg continued. "They don't show up without warrants for noise complaints, and they definitely don't take orders from self-appointed neighborhood leaders." Every word hammered another nail into Miranda's crumbling credibility. Then Mrs. Peterson stood up, her voice shaking with anger, humiliation, and betrayal. "I paid you $400 last month," she said directly to Miranda. "You told me it was mandatory anadromous fees. You said my family's safety depended on joining your security program. Now I find out there's no real HOA, no legal oversight, and you've been lying to all of us." That's when the room exploded with voices. Neighbors began speaking out, one after another, sharing stories of fees they'd paid, threats they'd received, elderly relatives Miranda had targeted for special assessments. The scope of Miranda's scam wasn't being revealed by investigators, and was being exposed by her own victims. Then people started dialing real emergency services, not the phony number Miranda had given out, but actual police dispatch. "We have people impersonating law enforcement at the Pinewood Heights Community Center," one man told the dispatcher. "They're trying to arrest residents over anadromous disputes." Another was already calling it what it was: "This is a coordinated fraud operation. Dozens of families have paid fake fees to someone pretending to be the HOA president." The fake officers panicked. You could see them scanning the room, looking for exits, trying to calculate if they could escape without being caught. But they'd made a crucial tactical mistake. In trying to control the crowd, they had spread themselves throughout the room, which meant when things fell apart, they were isolated and uncoordinated. Real cops are trained for controlled withdrawals under pressure. These guys, they were civilians in costume, and now it was obvious. Within 10 minutes, we heard sirens. Real law enforcement was responding to multiple 911 calls about impersonation and fraud. The moment those real officers stepped into the building, the contrast was crystal clear: professionalism, calm command, real equipment, legal authority. The sergeant stepped forward and asked, "Let me see your identification and department credentials." The fake officers froze. They had nothing to show. Because they weren't real, the arrest process was swift. Miranda's team was detained for impersonating law enforcement, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted extortion. Miranda herself was arrested for orchestrating the entire operation, elder abuse, targeting aspirants and other elderly residents, financial fraud and intimidation. The evidence was overwhelming: fake documents, bogus collection logs, photoshopped credentials, recorded threats, testimonies from victims. But the most poetic justice, that came when Captain Morgan walked in, my old SWAT team commander. He'd come as backup to the local police just in case things went sideways. The moment Miranda saw him, her face twisted with recognition and shock. "Mason," he grinned, "looks like you've been busy in retirement." The neighbors stared, realizing the problem neighbor Miranda had been demonizing this whole time was actually a former law enforcement commander. And this entire time, they'd been watching a professional outmaneuver a fraud. Meanwhile, Sam, a methodical and focused, was documenting everything: photographing evidence, recording witness statements, coordinating with the real officers. "This is organized criminal activity targeting a vulnerable community," he told the lead detective. "Systematic fraud, elder abuse, false representation of authority." The financial investigation revealed the full extent of Miranda's scheme. Over $47,000 stolen from 23 families in just 8 months, all under the fake banner of anadromous. Uniforms, banners, security patrols, scripted presentations, all of it fake, all of it fraud. All of Ida Miranda's fake uniforms, her staged presentations, and those so-called security patrols had been funded by neighbors who genuinely believed they were protecting their property values and families. But Miranda had been planning her exit. Her house was already listed for sale. Her bank accounts had been quietly drained over time, and everything pointed to her preparing to vanish with every last dollar. Fortunately, the real police moved fast. They froze her assets before she could complete her escape. The house sale was stopped, bank accounts locked, and even her car was seized as evidence. Thanks to the swift action, every family who had paid fake HOA fees would get their money back with interest. Elderly residents who had been specifically targeted received additional compensation for the emotional stress Miranda caused them. But perhaps the most powerful outcome wasn't legal or financial, it was emotional. The truth brought the neighborhood back together. People who'd been suspicious of each other, manipulated into silence or compliance, began sharing their stories. They'd all been victims of the same scheme, and realizing that helped heal old wounds. Mrs. Peterson apologized for believing lies about me. Greg took the lead on organizing a real, transparent neighborhood watch, one coordinated directly with local police. Even those who had once been too scared to speak up realized that true safety comes from neighbors standing together, not from fear-based control. As the fake officers were marched out in real handcuffs, and Miranda was escorted into a police vehicle, I felt a complicated mix of emotions: relief, justice, and closure. Esperanza had stood up when it mattered, and her bravery had saved the entire community from months, maybe years, of abuse and manipulation. But then, something happened that shifted everything again. As Miranda walked past Esperanza, she leaned in and whispered something. I didn't hear what it was, but I saw the effect. Esperanza went pale so suddenly and completely that I had to steady her. It was like all the breath had left her body. What did she say to you? I asked. Esperanza just shook her head, tears forming. Later, Mayo, when we're alone. And just like that, I knew Miranda's final words hadn't been random. They were personal, and probably devastating. The hours after the arrests were a whirlwind, but a productive one. Neighbors opened up, finally telling the truth about the money they'd handed over, the threats they'd received, and how they'd been living in fear. The real police were calm, precise, and reassuring. They gathered evidence, took statements, and walked everyone through the next steps. Sam was brilliant in that moment, coordinating between victims and law enforcement, ensuring that everyone's rights were protected and their financial losses recovered. He already had a plan for restitution, and even legal action if needed. The community was in good hands. But my mind was stuck on Esperanza. What had Miranda said that shook her so deeply? That night, once everything settled, I went to check on her. She sat quietly on her front porch, staring into the distance, the kind of look that only comes from carrying the weight of a hard truth. Mayo, she said gently, patting the chair beside her, there's something you need to know, a broken bar about why that woman targeted you. What she told me that night changed everything I thought I knew. 3 years ago, her nephew Tommy had called her from jail the week before he died. He told her about a SWAT commander who had treated him with dignity, offered to help him get clean, and even promised to be there when he got out. He believed someone saw him as more than just another statistic. As she told me this, my heart dropped. Esperanza continued, Tommy said you were the only officer who treated him like a human being, that you believed in him. And then it hit me, Miranda's entire vendetta wasn't about a homeowner's dispute. It wasn't about fake hoes. It wasn't even really about me. It was about Tommy. She had built her entire warpath on a lie. She told herself that I had betrayed her nephew, that I was somehow responsible for his death. But the truth was, I had been trying to help him. I had wanted to help him. Miranda's been carrying that guilt for 3 years, Esperanza said softly. She whispered to me that Tommy died believing in you, a broken bar, and she ruined everything trying to destroy the one person who gave him hope. I sat there in stunned silence, overwhelmed by the bitter irony. Miranda had built a criminal empire, wrecked her life, and nearly shattered a community, not for revenge, but for guilt. Guilt that came from knowing she had misunderstood the final truth about someone she loved. And as always, in a drama-nest view, a broken bar. Just when we think a story is done, the final twist turns everything upside down. What do you think? Miranda whispered. And could you forgive someone who nearly destroyed you, a broken bar, because they believed a lie? Let us know in the comments. 6 months later, I found myself face to face with Miranda in the county jail's visiting room. She looked smaller than I remembered, and not physically, but in spirit. The sharp, manipulative woman who once held our neighborhood hostage through fear and false authority was gone. In her place sat someone worn down by the truth, burdened by the full weight of what she'd done. "I know why you're here," she said quietly, before I could speak. "You want to understand why I did it? The truth is a broken bar. I don't even understand it myself anymore." Her voice trembled as she continued. "Tommy called me every week from jail. He talked about you a lot. Said you treated him with respect. Didn't use force during the arrest. A broken bar. Said you offered to help him find a program. That you promised to write a reference letter if he stayed clean. He died thinking you were one of the good ones." And yeah, her voice cracked. "I twisted all of that into proof of your guilt, because I needed someone to blame." The tears came freely now, with 3 years of rage and sorrow finally breaking through. "But I had something I needed to say too, Miranda," I said softly. "There's something you never knew. The week before Tommy died, a broken bar, he didn't just call you, he called me too." Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "He told me he was tired of running, tired of hurting people, tired of disappointing the few who still believed in him. He wanted to turn himself in. I promised him I'd help, that I'd walk him through the process, that he'd get credit for cooperating, and I'd get him into treatment. He was ready." The silence that followed was deafening. Miranda sat there, stunned, her entire belief system crumbling in real time. All of Ida, the hate, the planning, the crime, had been based on a lie she told herself. "Your nephew didn't die because of police brutality," I continued gently. "He died trying to change his life. You've spent 3 years destroying your own life via broken bar, trying to avenge something that never happened." Her collapse was complete. "I've lost everything," she sobbed. "My house, my freedom, my name. I turned neighbors against each other. I stole from people who just wanted to feel safe. I threatened Esperanza, a woman who's never hurt anyone. And I did it all in the name of a boy, broken bar, who died believing in redemption. I had thought I'd feel satisfied in this moment, vindicated. But all I felt was sadness. Sadness for Tommy, who died trying to become someone better. Sadness for Miranda, who let her grief turn into destruction. Sadness for our community, shattered by illusions of fear and control. And sadness for myself for realizing that sometimes, when you win, it doesn't feel like a victory. The legal system did its part. Miranda pled guilty to all charges: organized fraud, elder abuse, impersonating law enforcement, criminal conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. Her lawyer didn't even try to fight Ida. He recommended acceptance and responsibility. She was sentenced to 5 years in state prison, with the possibility of early release if she completed counseling and paid restitution. The judge didn't mince words. Targeting the elderly and manipulating community fear were aggravating factors. She would serve real time. But real closure came nearly a year later. Miranda began writing letters, one to every family she'd harmed, and not asking for forgiveness. She admitted she didn't deserve that, but accepting responsibility. She detailed the pain she caused, the fear, the financial losses, the fractures she drove between neighbors. To Esperanza, she wrote about Tommy's calls, how proud he was to have found an officer who saw him as a person, how much he believed in turning his life around. It was the closest thing to healing we could ever hope for. "The last time I visited Miranda in prison, she looked different again, still tired, still small, but somehow broken bar lighter, like someone who had finally stopped running from the truth. I can't undo what I did," she said, "but I can make sure Tommy's memory isn't defined by my mistakes. He died trying to be better. Maybe I can try too." It wasn't redemption. Some actions simply can't be undone. But it was the beginning of accountability. And sometimes a broken bar, that's the most justice we can realistically expect. Exactly 1 year after her arrest, our neighborhood came together for something new: Community Truth Day. A barbecue, a block party, a celebration not just of surviving Miranda's elaborate deception but of what we became because of it. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Her plan to divide us had actually brought us closer. We had faced a storm of lies, and walked through its tundra together. Sometimes, the strongest bonds are forged not in peace but in surviving a shared crisis. And as always, Anna Dramenest viewers, remember, real communities don't need fear to stay united. They need honesty, compassion, a broken bar, and the courage to face even the darkest truths. The party was held in the same community center where Miranda had once staged her phony HOA meetings, but this time, the energy was completely different. Instead of fearful neighbors being manipulated by fake authority, We were surrounded by genuine friends celebrating real connection, resilience, and truth. Esperanza was the guest of honor, celebrated by everyone as the woman whose courage had saved us all from further harm. Even the mayor showed up to present her with a community service award recognizing her extraordinary bravery in standing up to organized deception and criminal manipulation. Sam had become something of a local hero, not just for his legal help in recovering everyone's stolen funds, but for meticulously documenting Miranda's entire operation. His evidence had made prosecution airtight. He'd also played a huge role in creating something we never had before, a legitimate neighborhood association, registered with the state, run by elected leaders, with voluntary membership and fully transparent finances. We had learned the hard way the difference between real community organization and fake authority, but we had learned it well. Financial recovery exceeded all expectations. The sale of Miranda's house, combined with asset forfeitures and court-ordered restitution, meant every family received their stolen money back with interest. Elderly residents who had been specifically targeted were also compensated for emotional distress. But more than the money, we'd built something lasting, an emergency fund for future safety needs, overseen by elected trustees and governed with full financial transparency. In a strange twist of fate, Miranda's criminal empire had been transformed into the foundation of real community progress. Captain Morgan and members of my old SWAT team also attended the event. Their presence wasn't about enforcement, it was about partnership. They'd helped us launch a properly coordinated neighborhood watch program, trained us in recognizing authority-based scams, and opened direct lines of communication for reporting suspicious activity. We learned that real safety doesn't come from fear, it comes from cooperation between residents and legitimate law enforcement. But the most powerful moment of the day came when Mrs. Peterson, one of Miranda's earliest and most frightened believers, stood up to speak. "I want to apologize publicly to Mason Torres," she said, her voice clear. "I let fear override my common sense. I almost took part in the persecution of a good man who just wanted to live peacefully." Her honesty opened the floodgates. One by one, neighbors stood up, families who had been manipulated, who had fallen for the lies, who now wanted to make things right. They spoke of how fear clouded their judgment, how they learned to question false claims, and how they now verify credentials before trusting authority. It was like a community-wide therapy session, but with real healing, the kind that only comes from truth and forgiveness. Greg, our retired military neighbor, had become the de facto leader of our legitimate neighborhood watch. His talk that day about distinguishing fake authority from real was both enlightening and cathartic. Real authority protects people, he explained. Fake authority exploits them. Real authority welcomes questions. Fake authority demands blind obedience. Real authority builds safety. Fake authority profits from fear. The kids in our neighborhood even turned the entire experience into a civic lesson. The local high school's social studies classes were using our ordeal as a case study, an example of how democracy can be manipulated, and how community awareness can stop it. Esperanza became a regular guest speaker, sharing her story and reminding students that truth matters, no matter your age or how vulnerable others think you are. As the afternoon faded, I found myself in my backyard, the same place where this wild journey had started. Just me and Sam, cold beers in hand, football playing on the outdoor TV, same setup that triggered Miranda's original complaint about noise and gatherings. But everything else had changed. We weren't just two guys enjoying retirement anymore, we were part of something real, a neighborhood that had been tested, manipulated, shaken, a broken bar, and still found a way to come together. What started as a story for Ana Drama Nesta about lies, manipulation, and fear had transformed into something far greater, a story of truth, resilience, and community rebirth. "You know what's funny?" Sam said, gesturing toward the neighbors still chatting in clusters across the yard. "Miranda actually created the kind of community she always claimed she wanted, a place where people look out for one another and property values are protected through real safety measures. She just got there by becoming such a clear threat that we were forced to come together to stop her." Sometimes, the best way to build something good is by uniting against something truly harmful. Esperanza joined us on the patio, moving a little slower at 77 but with the same unshakable spirit that helped save the neighborhood. Mayo, she said, settling into the chair that now permanently belonged to her, do you think Miranda learned anything from all of this? It was a question that had lingered in all our minds. We knew she was doing her time participating in counseling programs, paying restitution, but had she really changed? Or was it all just part of the process? I think she learned that grief, when ignored, can turn into something dangerous, I said. Whether she can turn that understanding into something good, a broken bar, only time will tell. To be honest, I hoped Miranda would find redemption, and not for her own sake, but for ours. Communities heal more completely when they believe that even those who've done terrible things can change and contribute to something better. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing. It means choosing to rebuild with what's left, not what's lost. 2 years later, I'm writing this from the same backyard where it all began. But everything's changed. What started as a quiet retirement turned into something far more meaningful: active community leadership, regular work with law enforcement on fraud prevention, and friendships forged through shared hardship. Sam still comes over for football games, but now we're joined by Greg, Mrs. Peterson's family, and anyone else who wants to drop by. It's become a neighborhood tradition. The house next door in Miranda's old place is now home to a young family with 3 kids. They've become like grandchildren to Esperanza. They know the story of their home, understand the importance of community vigilance, and cherish being part of a neighborhood where people actually care about one another. Sometimes, the best way to heal trauma is to fill the space it left with something real and good. Our neighborhood is now a model for others facing similar threats. Sam gives regular talks at legal conferences about spotting and prosecuting fake HOA scams. I consult with police departments on suburban crime prevention. And Esperanza, she's become a respected regional voice for elderly rights and fraud protection. We turned our experience of being victims into expertise, and that expertise now protects others from falling into the same traps. But maybe the biggest lesson we learned is this: real community safety doesn't come from so-called authority figures telling you who to fear. It comes from neighbors who know each other well enough to sense when something's truly off. Miranda's fake power thrived on our disconnection. Our real security was reborn through trust, mutual respect, and shared responsibility. And sometimes, the people you think are your enemies, a broken bar, might be the ones trying hardest to save you. That realization hits different, doesn't it? If this story helped you recognize the signs of authority-based scams, please like this video and help Drama Nest spread awareness. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Another day, another ridiculous situation. Drama Nest delivers again. Don't forget to like and follow for more real stories, wild twists, and lessons that matter.